What if the fate of nations was once written in the stars? Picture a time when kings trembled at cryptic prophecies, when whispered warnings from stargazers could topple thrones or crown new rulers. Behind the grandeur of ancient palaces and battlefields, there existed a hidden world of astrologers and prophets, men and women who moved unseen through history, shaping destinies with nothing but their knowledge of the cosmos. Their influence was so great that emperors consulted them before waging war, and entire dynasties rose or fell based on their celestial predictions. But how did these shadowy figures gain such power, and what secrets did they guard so closely? Long before telescopes or modern science, these ancient seers studied the night sky with nothing but their eyes and intuition, deciphering patterns they believed held the keys to humanity's future. Their scrolls were filled with coded symbols, their rituals shrouded in secrecy. Some were revered as divine messengers, while others were feared as dangerous manipulators of fate. From the royal courts of Babylon to the temples of Greece, their predictions swayed decisions that altered history itself. Think of the Oracle of Delphi, whose enigmatic words guided kings, or the Babylonian astrologers who mapped celestial omens for their rulers. These weren't just fortune tellers, they were the shadow architects of empires. Yet their legacy is more than just dusty scrolls and forgotten prophecies. Hidden within their cryptic texts are clues to how ancient civilizations understood time, destiny, and the universe itself. Some of their methods still echo in modern astrology, while others remain tantalizing mysteries. How did they communicate across borders, sharing secret knowledge without detection? What coded messages might still be waiting to be uncovered? Today, we're pulling back the curtain on these enigmatic figures, tracing their hidden networks, decoding their rituals, and revealing how their whispers from the past still resonate. This is the story of how the stars ruled the world and the clandestine minds who claim to read their secrets. Stay with us, because what you're about to discover might just change how you see history itself. The roots of ancient astrology stretch back further than most realize, to a time when the night sky was humanity's first unchanging map. In the Fertile Crescent of Mesopotamia, the Babylonians didn't just observe the stars, they sculpted an entire science from their movements. Picture clay tablets etched with precise celestial records, some dating back over 3,000 years. These weren't mere observations, they were mathematical blueprints, tracking planetary paths with astonishing accuracy. The Babylonians called their star priests letter 1 E6 Dups Hachika R Enuma Anu Enlil, meaning scribes of the god's celestial script. To them, every eclipse, every comet was a divine telegram waiting to be decoded. Meanwhile, along the Nile, Egyptian astronomer-priests charted the heavens with equal fervor. Their temples doubled as observatories where the rising of Sirius signaled the annual flooding of the Nile, an event so critical it shaped their entire calendar. Unlike the Babylonians, who sought omens in sudden celestial events, the Egyptians saw the cosmos as a grand, predictable clockwork. Their star charts aligned with pyramids, turning monuments into eternal timekeepers. But what truly unified these ancient cultures was their belief that celestial patterns mirrored earthly events. A Mars wandering too close to Jupiter might foretell war. Venus appearing brighter than usual could signal royal birth. This wasn't superstition, it was an early form of pattern recognition, a cosmic fingerprint they believed the gods had left behind. Even their tools reveal sophistication. The Babylonian astrolabe, a star-measuring disk, or the Egyptian Merkit, a sighting device for aligning temples with constellations. The real breakthrough came when these stargazers began blending numbers with divine intuition. Babylonian math tablets show they could predict lunar eclipses within hours, centuries before Greek astronomers claimed the feat. Their zodiac, originally split into 12 equal signs, wasn't just for fortune-telling. It was a celestial coordinate system. And when these techniques reached Greece, they birthed horoscopic astrology, tying individual fates to planetary positions at birth. Yet beneath all this precision lay an unshakable mysticism. These scholars didn't separate science from spirit. A planetary alignment wasn't just geometry, it was a god whispering through geometry. That duality, the marriage of calculation and revelation, is what made their legacy endure. Today's astronomers might use telescopes instead of clay tablets, but the questions remain startlingly similar. How do celestial movements shape our world? And who gets to decide their meaning? The answers began with those first star priests who dared to translate the sky's silent language into something mortal minds could grasp. Power wasn't just handed to these ancient prophets and astrologers, they earned it through a dangerous game of foresight and deception. Take the Assyrian Empire, where no general would march to war without consulting the Baru, specialized diviners who read animal livers like celestial roadmaps. A single flawed prediction could mean disgrace, but a lucky one, that seer might dine at the king's table for life. The stakes were even higher in Rome, where Emperor Tiberius kept his personal astrologer Thrasyllus on a cliffside villa. One wrong forecast, and the man would have been pushed into the sea below. Yet their influence went far beyond battlefield strategies. When the Persian Magi interpreted a solar eclipse as a sign to overthrow their king, history records they succeeded. In China, court astronomers who failed to predict an eclipse could face execution, but those who accurately foretold celestial events gained authority to shape imperial policy. The line between advisor and power broker was razor thin. Even Alexander the Great carried Babylonian stargazers on his conquests, timing his sieges by planetary alignments, proof that destiny for these rulers was something to be engineered, not left to chance. What gave these seers such unshakable credibility? Part ritual, part psychology, and a heavy dose of calculated ambiguity. The Delphic oracle famously spoke in riddles, allowing rulers to interpret prophecies to their advantage. A phrase like, "a wooden wall will save you," could justify naval strength or literal barricades, depending on who needed what. Babylonian astrologers mastered the art of dual-meaning predictions, vague enough to avoid blame, specific enough to seem miraculous when events unfolded. But their greatest secret, networks, these weren't lone mystics muttering in temples. They were interconnected scholars sharing observations across empires. Clay tablets reveal Babylonian astronomers corresponding with Egyptian counterparts, comparing eclipse data like ancient scientists. Some even suspect Delphi's priestess inhaled ethylene gas from geological fissures, an early form of chemical divination disguised as divine breath. Whether through hidden knowledge or sheer political cunning, these figures didn't just predict history, they wrote it, one carefully veiled prophecy at a time. The darker truth, many were expendable. Roman histories tell of astrologers executed for predicting emperors' deaths even when they were right. In Byzantium, court stargazers often wore iron collars as reminders of their precarious status. Yet their legacy endures in unexpected ways. Modern political advisors still package hard truths in palatable metaphors, and leaders still crave certainty in uncertain times. The tools have changed, but the game remains eerily familiar, proof that power, whether in ancient Babylon or today, has always thrived on the illusion of controlling fate. The language of the stars was never meant for ordinary eyes. Ancient astrologers guarded their knowledge with codes so intricate, even modern scholars still struggle to crack them. Take the Babylonian Enuma Anu. Enlil tablets, thousands of clay records filled with celestial omens, but written in a shorthand only temple scribes understood. A single symbol could represent an entire planetary alignment, while seemingly random dots and wedges concealed precise mathematical formulas. These weren't just notes, they were a secret lexicon designed to keep cosmic wisdom out of the wrong hands. Then there were the Greek Hermetic texts where astrological knowledge hid in plain sight. A passage about the dancing of the seven sisters might actually describe the Pleiades cluster's movement, while references to the serpent's breath could encode the path of comets. Initiates learned to read between the lines, understanding that every myth and metaphor held double meanings. Even the famous Emerald Tablet, a cornerstone of alchemy, boasted layers of celestial code beneath its cryptic phrases. As above, so below wasn't just philosophy, it was instruction, hinting at hidden correspondences between stars and earthly events. Why such secrecy? In an age when knowledge was power, astrologers risked everything. Babylonian scribes who leaked celestial forecasts could face execution for treason. Greek scholars feared their star maps falling to rival city-states, giving enemies tactical advantages. But the deeper truth, these codes also preserved accuracy. By locking predictions behind complex symbolism, they prevented amateur interpretations from distorting sacred calculations. Imagine a medieval monk misreading an eclipse warning as mere poetry. Chaos could follow. Some secrets may still be waiting. The Vatican's archives hold rumored Hermetic scrolls yet to be fully translated, while cuneiform tablets in British museum vaults contain untranslated star charts. Modern technology like spectral imaging has revealed erased annotations on Egyptian zodiac's ghostly equations scratched out and rewritten. Were these mistakes corrected, or was someone hiding something? The most tantalizing possibility, that these texts hold forgotten celestial cycles, patterns so long-term they span centuries, invisible to short-lived human observers. Could a tablet from Babylon's ruins predict an alignment we haven't even seen yet? The codes remain stubbornly silent until the right key turns. What's clear is that secrecy wasn't just about control, it was about survival. In a world where kings killed messengers bearing bad omens, ambiguity became armor. Yet the irony is thick. Today's scientists peer into black holes with telescopes, while ancient astrologers hid black hole-level insights in plain clay. Both groups shared the same goal, to unravel the universe's mysteries. Only their rulebooks differed. One wrote in equations, the other in riddles. Both knew some truths are too powerful to leave unguarded. At the heart of ancient Greece, where olive groves whispered secrets to the wind, the Oracle of Delphi sat atop her tripod throne, breathing in the intoxicating fumes that rose from the earth. Pilgrims traveled for weeks, bearing lavish gifts, just to hear her utter a single cryptic phrase that might alter the course of their lives. Know thyself, the temple warned, but few understood how much of the oracle's power lay not in the divine, but in the delicate dance between perception and deception. Delphi wasn't alone. In the oak-covered sanctuary of Dodona, priestesses interpreted the rustling of leaves as messages from Zeus himself. At Siwa, Alexander the Great famously sought validation from the oracle before declaring himself a god. These weren't just shrines, they were strategic hubs where geopolitical alliances were forged and wars justified with a carefully worded prophecy. The priestesses, often young women chosen for their intuition and eloquence, mastered the art of ambiguity. When Croesus asked if he should invade Persia, Delphi replied, "A great empire will fall." He assumed it meant Persia's, but the empire that fell was his own. What fueled their influence? Geology and showmanship played equal parts. Modern studies suggest the sacred vapors at Delphi were likely ethylene gas seeping from fissures in the limestone, a natural anesthetic that induced euphoric trances. But the real genius lay in the delivery. Oracles never gave direct answers. Instead, they spoke in metaphors flexible enough to fit any outcome, turning failure into fate and coincidence into divine will. A king who lost a battle might reinterpret an oracle's words to mean his sacrifice had pleased the gods, while a merchant who prospered could credit the stars. Behind the mysticism, these sanctuaries operated like ancient think tanks. priestesses had access to networks of informants, merchants, soldiers, diplomats, feeding them whispers of distant conflicts and political unrest. When Sparta consulted Delphi about going to war, the oracle's reply didn't just reflect divine will. It echoed the temple's grasp of Sparta's military readiness and the mood of its allies. The line between prophecy and propaganda was razor-thin, yet to dismiss them as mere frauds misses the point. These women wielded a rare kind of power in a world that otherwise silenced female voices. Their trances granted them immunity. No one could punish a messenger channeling Apollo himself, and in a time before science could explain earthquakes or plagues, the oracles offered something priceless: the illusion of control. To hear a prophecy was to believe the future could be negotiated, that chaos had a pattern. The legacy of the oracles lingers in unexpected ways. Modern leaders still consult advisors who package hard truths in palatable metaphors. Fortune tellers still thrive on vague predictions that let clients find their own meaning. And perhaps that's the oldest truth of all. Humanity craves not certainty, but the comfort of believing someone, whether priestess or algorithm, holds the key to what comes next. The vapors may have faded, but the hunger for answers remains. When Alexander the Great stood at the banks of the Tigris River, facing the seemingly unbeatable Persian army, his decision to attack didn't come from scouts or spies alone, it came from the stars. His Babylonian astrologers had seen a celestial sign, Mars, the god of war, burning brighter than usual in the night sky. To his soldiers, this wasn't just a lucky break, it was divine endorsement. Across ancient battlefields, from the deserts of Egypt to the forests of Germania, wars were won and lost not just by swords and spears, but by the silent movements of planets. Hannibal's legendary crossing of the Alps with war elephants might never have happened if not for the Carthaginian seers who timed the march under a specific lunar phase. Roman historians later mocked this as superstition, but Hannibal knew better. The moon's light guided his troops through treacherous passes, while its absence hid them from enemy scouts. Celestial timing wasn't mystical guesswork, it was tactical advantage disguised as destiny. Even Julius Caesar, a man of ruthless pragmatism, postponed his invasion of Britain until his augurs spotted favorable bird flights, a practice rooted in the same belief that heaven's signs dictated earthly success. The deeper irony, many of these divine victories had chillingly practical explanations. Take the Battle of Gorgamla, where Alexander's astrologers predicted Persian King Darius would flee, a prophecy that became self-fulfilling when Alexander's night attack exploited the enemy's superstitious fear of fighting under a waning moon. Or the Siege of Syracuse, where Greek defenders allegedly used Archimedes' mirrors to burn Roman ships, an event later reinterpreted as an omen of scorching celestial wrath. Ancient generals understood something modern commanders still grapple with. Morale is as deadly as any weapon. An army convinced the gods favor them fights harder. Yet the risks were enormous. When Crassus ignored his Etruscan seers' warning about crossing the Euphrates, the river will run red with Roman blood, he marched straight into the Parthian trap at Carrhae, losing 30,000 men. Centuries later, Byzantine Emperor Heraclius nearly lost his throne after dismissing a comet's appearance as coincidence, only to face revolts fueled by prophecies of doom. The lesson was clear: even skeptics couldn't afford to ignore celestial theater when their troops believed. What modern historians often miss is how these astrologers functioned as early intelligence officers. Babylonian star priests tracked planetary cycles like military timetables. Knowing Venus's position could signal harvest seasons critical for planning sieges. Chinese astronomers used eclipse predictions to fake heavenly mandates, demoralizing enemies who saw darkened skies as divine abandonment. The line between astrology and strategy was invisible because in their world it didn't exist. Perhaps the most telling artifact sits in the Louvre, a clay tablet from Nineveh recording a lunar eclipse that halted two armies mid-battle. Both sides retreated, fearing wrath from above. Today, we'd call it mass psychology. To them, it was the universe itself choosing sides. That's the real power these stargazers held, not in controlling fate, but in convincing everyone else they could. In the shadow of Babylon's ziggurats, where the Euphrates carried whispers of the divine, the art of reading the stars wasn't just a skill, it was a state secret. Mesopotamian astrologers, known as the letter 1 E6 Dups Hachekar Enuma Anu Enlil, or scribes of celestial omens, operated under a rigid code. Their knowledge was so coveted that sharing it without royal consent could mean execution. Imagine a world where predicting an eclipse wasn't just a scientific achievement, but an act of treason if done outside the king's court. These scholars weren't merely stargazers, they were the gatekeepers of cosmic order, wielding influence that could sway empires. The punishment for leaking celestial secrets was etched into law. The Code of Hammurabi, one of history's earliest legal systems, prescribed death for unauthorized divination. Why such extreme measures? Because in Mesopotamia, astrology was the ultimate political weapon. A well-timed prediction could justify a tax hike, silence dissent, or even legitimize a coup. When an astrologer named Bel-Rimani was caught selling eclipse forecasts to a rival city, his hands were severed, a grim reminder that the stars belonged to the state. Yet their methods were anything but crude. Surviving clay tablets from Nineveh's library reveal mathematical sophistication that rivals modern astronomy. One tablet, known as the Goal Year text, accurately predicted lunar eclipses years in advance using complex cyclical calculations. Another, the Enuma Anu Enlil, contained 70 tablets of celestial omens, each entry painstakingly cross-referenced with historical events. If Mars approaches Scorpio, the king will face rebellion. Such lines weren't guesses, they were correlations drawn from centuries of data. The real intrigue lies in how this knowledge was transmitted. Apprentices underwent decades of training, memorizing thousands of omens in Sumerian, a language even most elites couldn't read. They learned to disguise predictions in metaphorical poetry, like warning of a lion in the palace to signal an assassin's plot. Only those who proved utterly loyal were taught the secretive dub, Jish, letter 1E2 BUR technique, a cipher system for encoding planetary motions in mundane trade records. But the greatest safeguard was psychological. By framing their craft as divine revelation, astrologers ensured that even if their methods leaked, few would dare use them. To challenge the king's stargazers was to challenge the gods themselves. This delicate balance of mysticism and mathematics kept their monopoly intact for millennia. Today, as scholars decode these ancient tablets, they're uncovering not just forgotten astronomy, but the blueprint of history's first knowledge economy, one where power didn't flow from gold or armies, but from who held the keys to the sky. The Nile's life-giving floods didn't just shape Egypt's soil, they were written in the stars. High atop temple rooftops, Astronomer-Priests tracked the heliacal rising of Sirius, the celestial event that heralded the river's annual surge. This wasn't mere observation, it was sacred synchronization. When the brightest star in the sky reappeared after 70 days of invisibility, the priests knew the floodwaters would follow within weeks. Their predictions were so precise that the Egyptian calendar itself revolved around this cosmic clock, dividing the year into 3 seasons: inundation, growth, and harvest. To the pharaohs, this was proof of their divine mandate, a bond between heaven and earth only they could mediate, but the real marvel lay in their tools. The Merkit, a simple wooden sighting device, allowed priests to align temples with celestial events, turning stone pillars into precision instruments. At Karnak, hidden corridors funneled moonlight onto altars only during specific lunar phases. and in Denderah's temple ceiling, a zodiac map rediscovered by Napoleon scholars depicted constellations with unsettling accuracy, suggesting knowledge passed down from eras before recorded history. Were these methods inherited from an even older, forgotten science? Some carvings show priests holding strange curved rods, their purpose still debated. Could these have been early astrolabes lost to time or deliberately concealed? The pharaoh's claim to divinity hinged on these celestial connections. When a new king ascended, priests timed the coronation to coincide with Sirius's rise, weaving his reign into the fabric of the cosmos. Pyramid shafts aligned with Orion's belt weren't just spiritual symbols, they were political propaganda, stone proclamations that the ruler's authority stretched beyond the mortal realm. Even the Great Sphinx, gazing eastward, may have been positioned to greet the lion-shaped constellation Leo during the spring equinox, a celestial nod to the pharaoh's lion-like strength. Yet beneath the grandeur lurked a delicate balance of power. Temple annals tell of astrologer-priests like Imhotep, who rose from royal architect to demigod by decoding celestial patterns. Others weren't so fortunate. When a priest named Pentu mispredicted a flood, records suggest he was banished to the desert, a warning that serving the gods carried mortal risks. The stakes were highest during dynastic turmoil. If Sirius's rise brought weak floods, it wasn't just a bad omen. It was a threat to the pharaoh's very legitimacy, a sign the gods had withdrawn their favor. What modern archaeologists find most startling is the overlap between mythology and astronomy. The myth of Osiris, murdered and resurrected, mirrors Orion's annual disappearance and return. The serpent Apophis, eternally battling the sun god Ra, could represent the Milky Way's winding path across the night sky. These weren't just stories, they were mnemonics, ways to encode celestial knowledge in plain sight. The final mystery, the Temple of Edfu's cryptic building texts, which claim its astrological secrets were copied from scrolls dating back to the first time, a primordial age when gods walked Egypt. Whether myth or lost history, one truth endures. Long before telescopes, these star priests engineered a civilization where politics, religion, and science orbited the same unshakable belief that to rule the Nile, you first had to read the sky. Beneath the marble columns of Alexandria's great library, a revolution was unfolding, one that would bind the stars to human fate like never before. The Greeks didn't just inherit astrology from Babylon and Egypt, they reimagined it, weaving rigorous geometry into celestial mythology until the cosmos became a grand, calculable storybook. Take Claudius Ptolemy, whose Tetrabiblos laid the groundwork for Western astrology. His star charts weren't mere sketches, they were mathematical masterpieces, plotting planetary movements with a precision that would guide navigators for centuries. Yet, even as he calculated, Ptolemy insisted the planets were divine instruments, their motions whispering the will of Zeus. This duality, myth as science, science as myth, defined Greek astrology's genius. Constellations became their playground for this fusion. The hero Perseus didn't just slay Medusa in legend. His celestial counterpart was a cluster of stars, his story etched across the night sky. The Greeks didn't see these patterns as random dots, but as a celestial theater, where Orion's eternal hunt or Andromeda's chains played out nightly. But here's the twist, these myths weren't just folklore. They served as mnemonic devices, helping astronomers memorize star positions long before paper charts existed. A sailor could navigate by following Heracles' bow, while a farmer knew to plant when Virgo's wheat-bearing figure rose at dusk. The stars were both clock and compass, wrapped in divine narrative. What set Greek astrologers apart was their hunger for systemization. Where Babylonian priests relied on omens, Greeks like Hipparchus developed trigonometry to measure stellar distances, discovering the precession of equinoxes, a slow wobble in Earth's axis that shifts constellations over millennia. This was groundbreaking. It meant the zodiac signs they'd mapped didn't perfectly align with actual star positions anymore. Yet rather than discard tradition, they layered new science atop old myths, creating a flexible framework that could adapt as knowledge grew. The legacy of this duality reached far beyond antiquity. A millennium later, Renaissance scholars pored over recovered Greek texts, marveling at how Ptolemy's cosmos mirrored Copernicus's heliocentric sketches. Kepler, while pioneering orbital mechanics, still cast horoscopes for patrons, convinced planetary angles influenced human temperament. Even Galileo, who shattered ancient sky myths with his telescope, spoke of the universe as a book written in geometric characters, a phrase echoing Pythagoras' belief that numbers govern celestial harmony. Perhaps the most enduring Greek innovation was democratizing the stars. Unlike Babylon's court-bound astrologers, Greek thinkers popularized horoscopes for ordinary citizens, claiming every birth chart held unique cosmic fingerprints. This idea that the heavens spoke to all, not just kings, would ripple through history from medieval almanacs to modern sun sign columns. Yet beneath it all lingered that original tension. Were the stars gods or gears in a grand machine? The Greeks never quite chose, and in that ambiguity, they gave us both astronomy and astrology, twin lenses through which we still gaze upward, searching for meaning in the infinite dark. Rome's marble halls echoed with whispered stargazing, but never when the emperor was listening. On the surface, astrology was outlawed repeatedly, with emperors like Augustus exiling astrologers and Tiberius executing those who cast his horoscope. Yet dig deeper and you'll find birth charts etched into the walls of Pompeii's brothels, and senators sneaking midnight consultations with Chaldean seers. This was the empire's open secret. Rome publicly condemned stargazers as charlatans while privately clinging to their predictions like lifelines. Tiberius embodied this contradiction. The same ruler who threw astrologers off cliffs kept Thrasyllus, his personal seer, locked in a cliffside villa, safe until his next prophecy. Why such extremes? Because Roman power balanced on a knife's edge. When an astrologer named Scribonius predicted Emperor Domitian's death by dagger, the paranoid ruler banned all celestial forecasts. Yet days before his actual assassination, he reportedly consulted a new seer, desperate for reassurance. Astrology wasn't just fortune-telling, it was political dynamite. A well-timed prediction of imperial doom could spark rebellions, as happened when Nero's court astrologer hinted at his coming downfall, emboldening revolts across Gaul. But the Senate's fear wasn't just about throne-stealing omens. Astrologers threatened Rome's entire social order. Slave-born stargazers could rise to advisor status, bypassing aristocratic hierarchies. Worse, mass horoscopes sold in the Forum gave plebeians the same cosmic insights as patricians, an unthinkable leveling of divine privilege. Imagine a fishmonger knowing his son's chart promised greatness, while a senator's heir's stars foretold disgrace. No wonder elites called astrology a Greek disease, corrupting Roman discipline with foreign mysticism. Yet the people adored it. Excavated curse tablets showed tavern keepers invoking Mars's position to jinx rivals, while gladiators etched zodiac symbols on their shields for protection. Even skeptical intellectuals like Cicero couldn't resist. His writings dismiss astrology as foolishness right before detailing how his brother's birth chart eerily predicted his consulship. This cultural schizophrenia reached its peak with Emperor Hadrian, who minted coins with Capricorn, his ruling sign, while simultaneously funding public debates to debunk astrological nonsense. The ultimate irony, Rome's persecution only made stargazers more powerful. Driven underground, they developed coded almanacs like the Carmen Astrologicum, disguising predictions as poetry. Some historians argue the Colosseum's opening games were timed to a Jupiter-Mars conjunction, hidden behind official religious ceremonies. And when Constantine later converted to Christianity, he didn't abandon astrology, he rebranded it, with court bishops quietly maintaining celestial calendars. What truly fueled Rome's obsession wasn't credulity, but control. In an empire stretching from Britain to Syria, where news traveled slower than comets, the stars offered an illusion of order. If a plague coincided with Saturn's retrograde, it wasn't chaos, it was fate, manageable through rituals. Modern leaders still traffic in similar illusions, whether through economic forecasts or polling data. The methods change, but the hunger remains, to believe someone, somewhere, can read the invisible patterns before they unfold. Rome's legacy isn't in its laws against astrology, but in how thoroughly it proved that even the fiercest skeptics will glance at the stars when the night grows dark enough. Deep beneath the bustling streets of ancient Alexandria, past the public halls of its legendary library, lay a network of private scriptoria where astrologers hoarded their most prized scrolls. These weren't just books, they were celestial weapons. The Egyptian priest Astronomer-Priests reportedly kept his personal library hidden behind false walls, its entrance marked only by a carving of the constellation Draco. In Baghdad centuries later, the famed House of Wisdom housed an entire wing accessible only to those who could solve geometric puzzles based on planetary orbits. These secret collections held knowledge too dangerous for public shelves: star maps predicting eclipses decades in advance, treatises on calculating planetary retrogrades, and coded manuals for interpreting celestial omens in ways that could destabilize empires. The fragility of these archives became tragically clear when Alexandria's libraries burned. While popular history blames Julius Caesar's siege, lesser-known accounts suggest targeted attacks on astrological collections. A Byzantine chronicle describes Roman soldiers smashing vessels filled with star-measuring rods and burning scrolls that spoke the language of comets. Yet not all was lost. Clever custodians had long practiced the art of dispersion, splitting collections across hidden locations. Some texts found refuge in Coptic monasteries, where monks meticulously copied zodiac diagrams alongside psalms. Others traveled east via merchant caravans, their contents disguised as trade ledgers. A 9th-century Persian geographer recounts finding a book of copper in a Kashmiri market, its etched plates revealing Babylonian eclipse tables from a millennium earlier. What might these lost works have contained? Clues surface in unexpected places. A parchment fragment uncovered in a Cairo synagogue basement contained Greek translations of Chaldean texts describing Jupiter's moons, visible only with lenses far beyond their era's technology. Were these lucky guesses or evidence of forgotten observational tools? Even more tantalizing are the gaps in surviving records. Ptolemy's Almagest references a star log of the southern realms, compiled by Phoenician navigators, detailing constellations unseen from Greece. No copy survives, but Polynesian oral traditions speak of star paths matching its descriptions, suggesting knowledge exchange across impossible distances. The greatest enigma lies in the deliberate destruction. When Caliph al-Mamun's scholars catalogued the House of Wisdom's holdings, they noted 27 volumes on the bending of light by celestial spheres, all marked for burning after his death. Were these early insights into refraction or something more esoteric? In Constantinople, Emperor Constantine VII ordered astrologers' libraries seized not to erase their knowledge but to monopolize it. His private vaults held encrypted manuscripts claiming to predict the lifetime of dynasties. Through planetary cycles, texts later stolen during the Fourth Crusade and lost in the Venetian lagoon's murky waters. Yet resilience defines this story. A single surviving page from the Alexandria archive, salvaged from bookbinding scraps in a Viennese monastery, contains a margin note explaining how to calculate Mercury's orbit using water clocks and shadow angles. It's signed by a woman Hypatia's student, perhaps proving these networks included minds history nearly erased. From Baghdad's ashes to monks' hiding places, the echoes of these libraries whisper a defiant truth. No flame burns hot enough to erase humanity's first conversations with the stars. History remembers the stargazers of Babylon and the oracle priests of Delphi, but what of the women who read the sky's secrets? Behind the grand narratives of male astrologers, a hidden lineage of prophetesses whispered futures into being, their wisdom veiled in myth or deliberately obscured. Take the Sibyls, those enigmatic seers scattered across the ancient Mediterranean. Unlike the Pythia at Delphi who spoke for Apollo, the Sibyls answered to no temple. Their prophecies came raw and unfiltered, scrawled on oak leaves in cryptic verses. Roman legends claim one offered King Tarquin 9 books of fate, each priced higher after he refused, until only 3 remained, destined to guide Rome through crises. But who were these women really? Fragments suggest some were itinerant visionaries, traveling from city to city, their trances induced not by temple fumes but by solitude and song. Then there were the Thessalian witches, so feared that Greek playwrights depicted them dragging the moon from the sky to halt time itself. Modern scholars recognize these stories as distortions of real lunar eclipse predictors. Women who tracked celestial cycles with such precision, their forecasts seemed supernatural. A 4th century vase even shows a woman pointing to a star chart while men kneel beside her, a rare glimpse of female astronomical authority. Yet by the Middle Ages, such images vanished. The same knowledge that made these women revered in antiquity later branded them as dangerous. The erasure wasn't accidental. As Christianity rose, texts like the Malleus Maleficarum recast star-reading women as devil worshippers. A 9th century bishop's letter orders the burning of star-stitched robes worn by Germanic seeresses, garments likely embroidered with constellation patterns. Even their tools were demonized. The vulva, a wand used by Norse prophetesses to mark stellar positions, became synonymous with witchcraft, yet fragments of their craft endure. In Bulgaria, folk songs still describe star wives who predicted invasions by watching Mars, while Armenian oral histories tell of exiled priestesses who encoded eclipse formulas into weaving patterns. What made these women targets? Control. Male-dominated institutions couldn't tolerate unregulated access to celestial knowledge. When the Sibyl Hierophile correctly predicted Troy's fall, later historians attributed her vision to madness. When Hypatia taught astronomy in Alexandria, she was murdered by a mob clutching Christian scrolls. The pattern is clear: women who decoded the heavens threatened hierarchies. Their stories weren't lost, they were buried under layers of fear. Rediscovering them rewrites history. A cuneiform tablet from Uruk lists a woman named Enheduanna as chief astronomer-priestess, her hymns to the moon god Nana containing precise lunar observations. In China, Ban Zhao's 1st century celestial treatise was dismissed as domestic advice until scholars noticed its sophisticated comet classifications. These women didn't just interpret the stars, they shaped empires from the shadows. Their legacies whisper a truth too long ignored. The sky's oldest readers often wore robes, not crowns. For every revered oracle who spoke truth, there were a dozen charlatans lurking in the shadows, trading fear for gold. In the back alleys of Rome, self-proclaimed seers peddled lead-cursed tablets, tiny scrolls inscribed with ominous astrological symbols, guaranteed to ruin a rival's fortune for the right price. Archaeologists have unearthed hundreds of these near temples, some still folded tightly, as if the buyer hoped to crush an enemy's destiny between their fingers. But the real deception lay in the details. Many tablets featured deliberately garbled star alignments, meaningless to trained astrologers but terrifying to the desperate. One recovered in Pompeii even threatened Jupiter's wrath unless the target's business failed, a celestial shakedown dressed as divine will. The scale of manipulation could be staggering. Greek playwrights mocked oracle mills near Delphi, where freelance prophets churned out generic doom sayings for travelers who couldn't afford the real Pythia. A surviving ledger from Corinth lists payments to a seer named Alexamenos, who allegedly staged elaborate hauntings to extort wealthy widows, his trick. Hiring boys to hide in temple rafters, shaking bronze sheets to mimic thunder whenever a client's unlucky horoscope was read. Yet the darkest schemes targeted the powerful. When Persian King Xerxes prepared to invade Greece, historians note his court astrologers suddenly discovered omens favoring victory, only to confess under torture that rival Greek city-states had paid them to mislead. Distinguishing truth from fraud wasn't just philosophical, it was a matter of survival. Athens had strict laws against star-mongering, requiring civic oracles to drink from a spring called clepsydra before prophesying. Its high iron content induced nausea, believed to reveal liars through physical distress. Babylon took it further. Astrologers advising the king underwent the river ordeal, bound and thrown into the Euphrates. If they drowned, the gods had rejected them. Survival proved divine favor. Few professions carried higher stakes. A cuneiform tablet from Nineveh records an astrologer's plea to the king. If my prediction fails, let my eyes be put out, but if I am right, let my wages be doubled. The line between witchcraft and legitimate divination often depended on who stood to gain. Roman court records tell of a woman named Locusta, accused of poisoning emperors with astrologically infused herbs. Yet her real crime wasn't magic, it was backing the wrong political faction. Meanwhile, Emperor Augustus employed his own court astrologer while publicly banning the practice, proving hypocrisy was the ultimate survival tactic. Even seemingly mystical tests had cynical roots. The famed Delphic honey test, where priestesses were said to hallucinate after eating sacred honey, likely weeded out suggestible candidates, ensuring only those resistant to psychoactive effects could hold office. Perhaps the most enduring legacy of these ancient scams isn't their cruelty, but their familiarity. Modern phishing emails echo the lead curse tablet's psychological ploys, while pyramid schemes mirror the Oracle Mill's assembly line deceit. The Babylonians had a term for false prophets, those who write darkness on clay. Thousands of years later, we're still grappling with the same question, not just who can predict the future, but who gets to sell it. When Hippocrates himself declared, "He who does not understand astrology is not a physician but a fool," he wasn't speaking metaphorically. Ancient medicine didn't separate the body from the cosmos, it saw them as mirrors. Greek physician Galen's treatises prescribed treatments based not just on symptoms, but on the position of Mars in the patient's birth chart, a headache under Aries season. That made sense. The zodiac's ram ruled the head, and inflamed passions might manifest as migraines. A kidney ailment during Libra's reign, the scales governed balance, including bodily fluids. This wasn't primitive guesswork, it was an intricate system where every organ, every humoral imbalance had its celestial counterpart. Harvesting herbs under precise planetary alignments was considered as vital as modern sterilization. The Roman naturalist Pliny documented how vervain gathered during a rising Sirius lost its potency, while dill plucked under Mercury's hour could sharpen memory. Lunar cycles dictated surgery, bloodletting avoided during full moons when humors grew turbulent, a belief modern studies suggest might have reduced infection risks by timing procedures to natural clotting rhythms. Even the famed Egyptian Ebers papyrus, dating back to 1500 BC, prescribed treatments tied to Sirius's heliacal rising when certain herbs allegedly absorbed celestial vitality. But the real sophistication lay in diagnosis. A Mesopotamian medical tablet from Nineveh lists 30 symptoms from jaundice to night sweats, each cross referenced with planetary positions on clay cylinder seals. If a patient fell ill when Jupiter was in retrograde, the treatment differed from the same symptoms appearing under Mars. Babylonian physicians used zodiac-based melathesia charts where each sign governed a body part, Taurus the throat, Scorpio the genitals. Sound familiar? Modern reflexology maps echo this ancient concept of bodily zones, though now divorced from the stars. The line between science and superstition blurs when you examine their results. Galen's astrological pulse readings timed to planetary hours often aligned with observable symptoms, not because the stars caused illness, but because seasonal shifts affected disease patterns. Malaria spiked during summer's Leo season, when stagnant waters bred mosquitoes. Winter's Capricorn brought respiratory ills from damp air. By attributing these patterns to celestial influence, ancient doctors created an early framework for preventative care, one that acknowledged environmental factors, even if mislabeled as cosmic forces. Critics called it fatalism, but the system had flexibility. When Roman encyclopedist Celsus noted that stars incline but do not compel, he captured medicine's pragmatic side. A skilled physician might override astrological advice if a patient's condition demanded it, much like modern doctors balancing statistics with individual cases. The real legacy of astrological medicine isn't in its celestial dogma, but in its holistic vision, a reminder that health spans far beyond the physical, intertwined with time, season, and yes, even the stars above. Among the most fascinating artifacts recovered from ancient astrological workshops are instruments that blur the line between mythology and precision engineering. The astrolabe, often called the smartphone of the medieval world, had its origins much earlier in the hands of Greek and Persian scholars who could calculate star positions with startling accuracy. But recent excavations near Baghdad uncovered something stranger. A set of bronze discs etched with celestial maps too precise for their purported age, their gears and markings suggesting an understanding of planetary motion that predates known astronomy by centuries. Were these the work of lone geniuses or fragments of a widespread scientific tradition now lost to time? Even more enigmatic are the few surviving armillary spheres, complex models of orbiting rings representing celestial paths. Chinese annals describe their imperial astronomers using jewel-inlaid spheres to predict eclipses, while Roman texts mention portable versions carried by military stargazers. The craftsmanship astounds. One Hellenistic sphere recovered from a Mediterranean shipwreck features adjustable rings calibrated to account for the precession of equinoxes, a phenomenon official histories claim wasn't understood until Hipparchus centuries later. How did such devices exist before the math that should have made them possible? Then there are the outliers, tools that defy classification. In 1983, divers off Antikythera found a corroded bronze mechanism now recognized as the world's oldest analog computer. Its dials could track Olympic cycles, lunar phases, and planetary positions with gearwork rivaling 18th century clocks, yet it dates to the 1st century BC. Who built it? A letter from Cicero mentions Posidonius owning a device that reproduced the heavens. Was this it? Even more puzzling are the Dendera zodiac's missing fragments, which some scholars believe once formed part of a temple-mounted instrument for aligning rituals with Sirius's rising. The real mystery lies in what hasn't been found. Arabic manuscripts reference the seven-sided mirror of Hermes, said to project celestial paths onto walls, a potential lost ancestor of the planetarium. Byzantine texts warn of star-measuring engines destroyed during iconoclasm for being too persuasive in predicting rulers' deaths. Most haunting are the gaps in the record. Why do Babylonian tablets describe water clocks linked to star charts, yet none survive? What became of the moving spheres Aristotle dismissed as charlatans' tricks, but which sound eerily like mechanical orreries? Perhaps the most telling clue comes from an unexpected source: artisan traditions. The same metalworking techniques that created astrolabes also produced ancient flying toys described in Egyptian murals, objects now shelved as ritual items, but which share uncanny similarities with early aviation models. Could the astrologers' tools have been part of a broader experimental science, one that blended observation, mechanics, and metaphysics in ways we're only beginning to recognize. When a medieval Persian astrolabe turns out to contain eclipse calculations accurate to within minutes, or a Mayan codex's Venus tables match modern astronomy, it forces a humbling question. How much of their technology did we dismiss as superstition before we had the knowledge to understand it? The answer might still be spinning silently in some undiscovered vault, waiting for its gears to be read anew. Behind the public face of ancient astrology lay a shadow world of closed-door brotherhoods where knowledge wasn't just taught, it was whispered. The Pythagoreans weren't merely mathematicians, they were a cult of stargazers who believed numbers held cosmic secrets. New members endured years of silence, swearing blood oaths never to reveal their discoveries, like the irrationality of the square root of 2, a truth so dangerous, legend claims one initiate was drowned for leaking it. Their rituals tied celestial harmonies to earthly existence, chanting specific tones to align with planetary vibrations or fasting during Saturn's zenith to absorb its disciplined energy. To them, the zodiac wasn't just a map, it was a living equation accessible only to those who'd proven their loyalty. Then there were the Hermeticists, named after the mythical Thoth Hermes, who allegedly penned the Emerald Tablet's cryptic words, "As above, so below." In Alexandria's backstreets, initiates underwent elaborate trials interpreting star charts blindfolded, solving geometric puzzles under time constraints before gaining access to guarded texts. One surviving papyrus fragment describes a rite where candidates laid beneath a perforated copper dome while an elder projected star patterns onto their bodies, binding constellations to their flesh in symbolic initiation. The price of failure, memory-erasing potions made from lotus and poppy, ensuring no secrets escaped. The Chaldean oracles operated even deeper in the shadows. These Mesopotamian mystics didn't just predict celestial events, they claimed to manipulate them. A recovered cuneiform tablet from Uruk details a ritual where 7 initiates formed a circle during lunar eclipses, chanting to hold back the dragon, believed to swallow the moon. Their inner teachings supposedly included methods to calculate aeon cycles, vast astrological ages spanning thousands of years, knowledge so potent that Roman emperors later hunted their scrolls to control perceived threats to their rule. What unified these groups was their obsession with tiers of knowledge. The outer circle might learn basic horoscopes, the inner circle mastered eclipse prediction, but only the highest initiates studied theurgy, the art of drawing down planetary powers into statues or talismans. A Greek magical papyrus from the 3rd century describes invoking Sirius's energy into a lapis lazuli amulet to gain oracular dreams, warning that misuse could burn the soul to ashes. Perhaps the most chilling evidence of their secrecy lies in what was destroyed. When Christian mobs sacked the Serapeum in Alexandria, they reported finding astrological wheels with movable parts, early analog computers smashed by the priests themselves rather than surrendered. Later, Islamic scholars like al-Biruni wrote of Indian Jyotisha masters who burned their manuscripts upon death, passing knowledge orally to prevent leakage. Even today, scattered clues endure. A Venetian grimoire's star sigils matching Coptic temple murals, or a Tibetan monk's silent demonstration of Mercury's retrograde motion using nested copper bowls, techniques with no written record, only whispered lineages. The greatest secret these societies guarded wasn't just celestial mechanics. It was the fragile truth that their power came not from divine favor, but from disciplined observation. By cloaking astronomy in ritual, they protected it from emperors who'd weaponize it and zealots who'd destroy it. Their legacy whispers a paradox. Sometimes knowledge survives only when hidden in plain sight, veiled as mystery. No prophecy burned brighter in history's memory than the words spoken to Croesus, king of Lydia, before his fateful war with Persia. When Delphi's oracle declared, "A great empire will fall," the confident ruler assumed it meant his enemies, only to watch his own kingdom crumble. This wasn't just a failed prediction, it was psychological warfare disguised as divine wisdom. Across the ancient world, seers wielded prophecies like loaded dice, nudging events toward outcomes that served the powerful or themselves. The Babylonian prophecy of Marduk predicted the return of a just king whenever rebellion simmered, a convenient narrative to quell dissent. In Rome, the Sibylline books were consulted exclusively during crises, their verses interpreted to justify extreme measures, from military drafts to rationing, making them less forecasts than political tools. But some predictions carried echoes too precise to dismiss as mere manipulation. When Babylonian astrologers warned Nebuchadnezzar of a celestial sword over Jerusalem, the king's subsequent siege aligned uncannily with a recorded solar eclipse, an event their calculations could genuinely predict. Even skeptics like Thucydides noted how Delphi's vague warnings often coincided with tangible threats. Epidemics foreshadowed by poisoned winds in oracles turned out to be plague ships arriving from Egypt. The line between foresight and coincidence blurred dangerously. Then there were the prophecies that became self-fulfilling by sheer force of belief. Alexander the Great's lifelong obsession with being the son of Zeus stemmed from an Egyptian oracle's declaration at Siwa, one his enemies dismiss as staged, but which rallied his troops to near-mythic victories. Joan of Arc's later claim of celestial voices mirrors this same dynamic. When enough people treat a prediction as truth, it gains the power to reshape reality. Modern historians grapple with a haunting question. How many wars began not because of genuine omens, but because someone convinced a ruler the stars demanded it? The answer lies buried in fragments. Assyrian war reports cite astrological charts as justification for invasions, while Chinese court records reveal emperors timing attacks to auspicious planetary alignments. Even when prophecies failed, like the doomed Athenian expedition to Sicily, launched under favorable signs, their cultural grip remained. Leaders dared not ignore them for fear of undermining their own legitimacy. The darkest twist, some prophecies survived because they were wrong. Rome's Sibylline books supposedly contained apocalyptic warnings, but senators curated only the verses useful for control. The rest were burned, not to suppress truth, but to erase alternatives. What remains today are echoes of predictions that shaped history, not by being accurate, but by being believed. In that sense, the ancient seers' greatest power wasn't foreseeing the future, it was convincing everyone else they could. The collision between faith and the stars ignited some of history's most explosive theological battles, yet their relationship was never simple. When the Star of Bethlehem blazed over Judea, early church fathers wrestled with its meaning. Was it a miraculous sign from God or a celestial event astrologers could explain? Tertullian raged against star-worshipping Chaldeans, yet his contemporary Origen quietly admitted the Magi likely followed legitimate planetary alignments. This tension between rejecting astrology as pagan divination while embracing its symbolism became Christianity's open secret. The same scriptures that condemned sorcery described angels appearing as constellations, and Psalm 19 proclaimed, "The heavens declare the glory of God." Islam's engagement was even more complex. While the Quran warned against divination, medieval Persian astronomers like al-Biruni composed voluminous star catalogues under caliph's patronage. The great al-Ghazali condemned horoscopes as blasphemous interference with divine will, yet mosques from Cordoba to Damascus were oriented using stellar calculations. In one astonishing compromise, Islamic scholars reimagined astrology as the science of indications, studying celestial patterns not to predict, but to understand God's orderly universe. The turning point came with Augustine's fiery sermons. He branded astrology a demonic counterfeit of divine providence, arguing that if stars controlled fate, humans bore no moral responsibility. His logic was weaponized during the Inquisition when star reading became grounds for heresy charges. Yet even as church officials burned astrological texts, monks in secluded monasteries quietly preserved them. The Vatican's own archives later revealed 11th century manuscripts where zodiac signs illustrated biblical scenes: Virgo as the Virgin Mary, Pisces symbolizing Christ's apostles. Eastern faiths danced the same delicate balance. Hindu temple ceilings glittered with precise star maps, yet the law of Manu forbade Brahmins from practicing astrology for profit. Buddhist monks in China composed astrological calendars to time imperial ceremonies, while Zen masters dismissed them as clouds obscuring the moon of truth. Judaism's stance was perhaps most paradoxical. The Torah banned star-gazing, yet Kabbalistic texts like the Sefer Yetzirah wove planetary spheres into the fabric of creation. What fueled this hypocrisy, power, and fear? When Pope Urban VIII commissioned his personal astrologer to chart the perfect day for consecrating St. Peter's Basilica, he wasn't indulging superstition, he was asserting control over time itself. Conversely, when Luther nailed his theses to Wittenberg's door, he included astrology among the church's corruptions, yet his ally Melanchthon later taught it at Protestant universities. The stars, it seemed, were too useful to abandon, yet too dangerous to acknowledge. The ultimate irony emerged in art. Giotto's adoration of the Magi frescoes show the Star of Bethlehem with a comet's tail, a direct nod to Halley's appearance in 1304. Michelangelo hid zodiac emblems in the Sistine Chapel's architectural borders. These weren't secret heresies, they were silent compromises where the heavens could be reverenced as God's handiwork so long as no one called it prediction. The real lesson of history isn't that religion defeated astrology, but that both evolved to share the same sky, one as revelation, the other as calculation, each reflecting humanity's endless hunger to find meaning in the infinite dark. Even as empires crumbled and religions rose to purge pagan knowledge, the stars refused to be silenced. In the smoky scriptoria of 9th century Baghdad, scholars like Al-Kindi and Albumassar pored over rescued Greek texts, translating Ptolemy's star charts while adding observations from Indian and Persian astronomers. Their breakthroughs weren't just academic, they were acts of defiance. When the Abbasid caliphs ordered the stars studied for agricultural and medical timing, they unknowingly preserved the very techniques Christian and Zoroastrian authorities had tried to erase. The Zij al-Sindhind, an astronomical manual blending Hindu and Greek methods, became the hidden bridge between antiquity and the Renaissance, its tables secretly copied by monks in Toledo and Palermo. Horary astrology, the ancient art of answering questions based on the sky's snapshot at the moment they're asked, survived in the margins. A physician in 12th century Cairo might cast a horary chart to diagnose illness, just as Babylonian priests had done millennia earlier. The key wasn't just tradition, it was utility. Farmers from Andalusia to the Indus Valley still planted by the moon's phases, while sailors navigated by Jupiter's position, practical needs outweighing theological decrees. Even the church's ban couldn't stop medical students at Padua from memorizing zodiac man diagrams where each body part was ruled by a constellation. The real shock is how little has changed. Modern natal charts still use the Babylonian 12-house system, their angles calculated with algorithms instead of clay tablets. The part of fortune, a sensitive point in horoscopes today, appears verbatim in Dorotheus of Sidon's 1st century poems. When you check your sun sign in a newspaper column, you're unwittingly invoking Manilius's zodiac interpretations from Augustus's Rome. The difference, speed and scale. Apps now generate in seconds what once took teams of temple scribes weeks to compute, but the underlying math remains Ptolemy's. Darker practices endured too. Electional astrology, the controversial method of timing events for optimal outcomes, still guides everything from wedding dates to stock market trades, a direct descendant of Assyrian war planners choosing battle dates by Venus's position. The most haunting continuity, omen literature. Just as Babylonians tracked disasters coinciding with eclipses, today's conspiracy theorists link planetary alignments to earthly upheavals. The packaging changes, the human hunger for cosmic patterns does not. Perhaps the greatest testament to these practices' resilience lies in their mutability. Tibetan monks merged Greek horoscopy with Buddhist cosmology to create karma calculating calendars. Mexican curanderos blended Aztec tonalpohuale cycles with Spanish decanic magic. Like water finding cracks in stone, astrological knowledge adapted to survive not because it was infallible, but because it answered something timeless in us. The need to feel the universe speaks, even if we've forgotten its original language. The story of the three wise men has echoed through centuries, but peel back the layers of tradition, and you'll find a tantalizing astronomical puzzle at its core. These mysterious magi weren't just wise men. They were likely elite astrologers from Persia or Babylon, trained in deciphering celestial omens. When the Gospel of Matthew describes them following a star to Bethlehem, it wasn't poetic flourish, it was recording a real practice among ancient stargazers who believed planetary alignments heralded earthly events. So what cosmic sign could have sent them westward with gifts for a newborn king? Modern astronomers point to a rare celestial dance in the year 7 BC, when Jupiter and Saturn converged in the constellation Pisces, an event so striking it would have lit up the night sky for months. To Babylonian astrologers, this was no ordinary meeting. Jupiter symbolized kingship, Saturn stood for justice, and Pisces was associated with the Levant. A triple conjunction where the planets passed each other 3 times in close succession would have screamed one message: a righteous ruler was being born in Judea. Ancient cuneiform tablets from Sippar even record such planetary events being used to predict royal births, proving the Magi's journey had precedent. But there's another contender. Chinese sky watchers documented an unusual guest star around 5 BC, possibly a nova or supernova bright enough to guide travelers. Roman historian Tertullian later claimed the Star of Bethlehem was a comet, evoking imagery of a celestial beacon. The truth might lie in layered interpretations. The Magi could have tracked the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction as the prophecy's trigger, then followed a later, brighter phenomenon, a comet or nova, as their literal guiding light. The brilliance of this story isn't just in the astronomy, it's in the cultural subtext. Persian Magi were Zoroastrian priests, rivals to Judean beliefs, yet Matthew's account shows them bowing to a Jewish Messiah. This wasn't just a star story, it was political dynamite, suggesting even foreign elite recognized this child's significance. The star's legacy endures because it lives at the intersection of faith and science, where ancient stargazers and gospel writers agreed, sometimes the sky speaks. Whether divine miracle or celestial coincidence, the Star of Bethlehem remains history's most famous celestial road sign, one that still shines in collective imagination 2 millennia later. The question of fate versus free will haunted ancient astrologers as fiercely as it troubles us today. On one hand, Babylonian eclipse tablets spoke of celestial events as unbreakable decrees. When the moon darkens, the king will die, phrased with the finality of carved stone. Yet scrolls from the same era reveal clients pleading with priests to loosen the star's grip through rituals, suggesting even the most devout believers clung to hope they could bend destiny. This tension wasn't just philosophical, it shaped empires. When Alexander the Great's seers warned that crossing the Tigris under Mars retrograde courted disaster, he famously replied, "I am my own omen," then charged forward regardless and won. His gamble exposed astrology's open secret. The stars might set the stage, but humans wrote the play. The Stoics framed this paradox with striking nuance. Thinkers like Posidonius taught that celestial patterns created inclinations, not imprisonments like a river's current steering but not determining a swimmer's path. A birth chart showing martial Mars dominating might suggest a soldier's temperament, but whether that energy expressed as battlefield heroism or butcher's trade depended on choice. Even Ptolemy, whose star charts codified Western astrology, conceded in his Tetrabiblos that the wise man rules his stars, acknowledging upbringing and effort could override cosmic leanings. What's startling is how ancient cultures engineered systems to navigate this ambiguity. Mesopotamian Nambabai rituals allowed people to ritually undo bad omens, symbolically scrubbing fate's slate clean. Egyptian demon bowls inscribed with spells and buried under homes were believed to intercept celestial malice before it struck. These weren't rejections of astrology's power, but negotiations with it, an acknowledgement that while the stars whispered, mortals still had tongues to answer back. The real masterstroke came in how prophets packaged their predictions. Delphi's infamous, "If you go to war, a great empire will fall," forced listeners to confront their own interpretations, making them co-authors of the prophecy's meaning. Babylonian astrologers often issued paired forecasts, one assuming corrective action, one without letting rulers feel they held the reins. This psychological dance reached its height in imperial Rome, where politicians paid for conditional horoscopes, outlining different outcomes based on their decisions, transforming fatalism into a motivational tool. Perhaps the most poignant evidence comes from personal artifacts. A Greco-Egyptian papyrus from the 2nd century features a woman's desperate plea to an astrologer. "You say Saturn opposes my love. Tell me how to sweeten his gaze." Beside the planetary calculations, the priest scribbled remedies, rose offerings to Venus, copper charms worn during Jupiter's hour. In that fragile exchange, we see antiquity's true relationship with the stars, not as blind submission to fate, but as the earliest form of self-help, a celestial mirror held up to humanity's restless, hopeful heart. The art of astrological magic. In the dim glow of oil lamps, a Persian magus chants over a silver talisman engraved with the sigil of Jupiter, timing his incantation to the precise moment the planet crests the horizon. This wasn't mere superstition, it was precision engineering of the unseen. Ancient astrological magic blurred the line between prayer and physics, treating celestial bodies as living forces that could be harnessed through ritual. Texts like the Picatrix, a medieval grimoire so potent it was banned by popes, detail spells to capture Venus's energy in copper mirrors or summon Mars's fury by etching his symbol onto iron during eclipses. To modern eyes, these practices seem like fantasy, but to their practitioners, they were as logical as programming a computer. Input the right symbols at the right cosmic moment, and the universe would output results. Consider the rigor behind these rituals. A 9th century Arabic manuscript prescribes crafting a Mercury talisman only when the planet is in Gemini during the first hour of Wednesday, using quicksilver and lapis lazuli. Specific, absolutely, but this wasn't arbitrary. It mirrored the Babylonians' discovery that Mercury's movements correlated with trade winds, making its hour the optimal time for rituals involving communication or travel. Even the colors mattered. Jupiter's deep blues matched its association with expansion, while Saturn's leaden hues reflected its astrological link to boundaries. These weren't random guesses, they were early attempts to align human action with cosmic patterns. The real controversy lies in how these practices straddled magic and proto-science. When a Hellenistic magician recited Orphic hymns to invoke the moon's power, was he deluded, or was he tapping into the same lunar cycles that modern studies show affect tides and sleep patterns? The Picatrix's claim that Saturn's cold nature could preserve food sounds absurd. Until you learn the Romans stored grain in lead-lined cellars, Saturn's metal, unknowingly exploiting its antimicrobial properties. Coincidence, maybe, but it hints at forgotten threads of observation where myth and material reality intertwined. Some rituals defy easy dismissal. The Zodiac Man diagrams, which linked each body part to a zodiac sign, guided surgeons to avoid operating on Taurus-ruled throats during Taurus season, when humors were thought to congregate there. Superstition, or an early grasp of seasonal illness patterns. Even more striking are the planet bowls found from Egypt to Mesopotamia, inscribed with planetary invocations and buried upside down to trap celestial influences. Modern energy healers might call this resonance. A skeptic would label it placebo, but the bowl's prevalence suggests they delivered something believers found real. The darkest edge of this craft was its political weaponization. Byzantine emperors paid Armenian star mages to craft talismans ensuring military victory, while Arabic treatises warned of counter-talismans to neutralize enemy magic. When Saladin's forces fought the Crusaders, chroniclers noted both sides delaying battles until their astrologers approved the hour. This wasn't just faith, it was psychological warfare, leveraging celestial timing to unsettle foes who believed in its power. What survives today are echoes in unexpected places. The planetary hours system governs modern horary astrology, while ceremonial magicians still time rituals by the moon's phase. A Silicon Valley tech CEO might smirk at Mercury retrograde warnings, then postpone a product launch anyway, just in case. The real legacy of astrological magic isn't in its spells, but in its enduring question. If the universe operates by invisible rules, who's to say the ancients' maps of those rules were entirely wrong? Their method seems strange to us, but their goal to harmonize human life with cosmic rhythms feels eerily modern. After all, we still track sleep cycles by circadian rhythms and plant crops by seasons. The language has changed, but the longing remains, to feel connected to something vast, predictable, and yet mysteriously alive. Long before compasses or GPS, the open ocean was a vast and terrifying expanse until merchants learned to read the language of the stars. For ancient traders, celestial navigation wasn't just about plotting courses, it was a matter of survival. The Phoenicians, those legendary seafarers of the Mediterranean, didn't merely follow the North Star, they timed entire trading seasons around the heliacal rising of Sirius, knowing its appearance signaled calm summer winds perfect for crossing to Egypt. Their star charts etched onto beaten copper sheets weren't just maps, they were almanacs of opportunity, marking windows when the seas were free of pirates and the markets ripe for spice and silk. But the stars offered more than directional guidance. Babylonian clay tablets reveal how merchants paid astrologers to cast sailing horoscopes, determining the luckiest days to embark. A voyage launched under a waxing moon promised prosperity, while Mars lingering near the moon's node warned of storms or raiders. The Greeks took it further, with the poet Aratus detailing how Orion's position could predict sudden gales, knowledge later codified in the Periplus of the Erythraean Sea, a first-century guidebook blending star lore with trade routes. Imagine the edge this gave a captain who could tell his crew, "We sail in 3 days. When Jupiter trines the moon, the winds will favor us." The real genius lay in merging myth with mathematics. Polynesian navigators memorized star paths as constellation highways, using the Southern Cross to guide voyages across thousands of miles of open Pacific. Their star compasses, taught through chants and stick charts, tied each star not just to direction, but to seasonal currents and bird migration patterns, a holistic system surpassing European navigation until the Renaissance. Meanwhile, Arab traders in the Indian Ocean relied on the camel, a simple wooden rectangle that measured a star's altitude against the horizon. But this tool wasn't used alone. It was paired with astrological tables like the Zij al-Sindhind, which accounted for planetary movements affecting tides. Celestial navigation also became a form of corporate espionage. Venetian glassmakers, guarding their monopoly on luxury mirrors, timed secret deliveries to coincide with Venus's invisibility periods, believing competitors wouldn't risk sailing without its lucky light. Chinese junks carrying porcelain waited for the dragon's breath, a term for the monsoon winds predicted by Jupiter's position in the lunar mansions. Even pirates played the game. Carib raiders were said to ambush Spanish galleons only during dark of moon phases, when celestial conditions masked their approach. The legacy of these star-guided voyages lingers in surprising ways. Modern shipping lanes still loosely follow ancient Phoenician routes favored by predictable winds first identified through stellar correlations. The word disaster itself comes from the Latin disastrum, meaning bad star, a reminder of how deeply trade and fate were tied to the cosmos. Today's cargo ships might use satellites, but the principle remains unchanged. To move goods safely across the unknown, humans still look upward, trusting in patterns older than civilization itself. The stars that once guided clinking spice caravans and creaking wooden hulls now silently steer steel containers, proof that some navigational wisdom transcends time, even if its original keepers have faded into myth. The shift was gradual at first, an emperor converting to Christianity here, a pagan temple repurposed there, but by the time Rome fell, the stars had lost their voice in the halls of power. Christianity's rise didn't just challenge astrology, it reframed the cosmos as a creation, not a controller of human destiny. Church fathers like Augustine argued that if the planets dictated fate, then prayer and free will were meaningless. His rhetoric turned stargazers from respected scholars into suspected heretics overnight. Yet the real blow came from Rome's collapse itself. As libraries burned and empires fractured, the intricate Babylonian eclipse records and Egyptian star charts that had guided kings for millennia were scattered, burned, or buried beneath monastery cellars. But the stars refused to fade quietly. While official scholarship turned away, astrology survived in the margins, not as science, but as folk wisdom. Farmers still planted by the moon's phases, sailors navigated by Polaris, and midwives consulted zodiacal birth charts, all beneath the church's wary gaze. In 7th century Spain, Isidore of Seville grudgingly admitted in his etymologies that astrology could predict weather, a tiny crack in the dam of disapproval. Even Charlemagne, the great Christian emperor, employed a court astrologer to time his coronation. The irony was thick. The very institution that condemned star reading often relied on it when convenient. The scientific revolution should have been astrology's death knell. When Galileo's telescope revealed moons orbiting Jupiter in 1610, it shattered the ancient geocentric model that had underpinned celestial divination. Kepler, though a famed astrologer himself, reduced planets to mathematical equations, their movements predictable but impersonal. Yet here's the twist: astrology didn't vanish, it migrated. Almanacs blending weather forecasts with zodiac advice became cottage industry bestsellers. Newton, the father of physics, obsessed over alchemical star lore in private. The Enlightenment's rationalists mocked stargazers as relics, even as their own wives consulted star ladies for childbearing advice. The final exile came from academia. As universities formalized astronomy into a rigorous discipline, astrology was expelled to the realm of superstition, a label that stuck thanks to Victorian-era charlatans peddling generic horoscopes. Yet the ancient art's core never truly died. Jung's 20th century concept of synchronicity, meaningful coincidences, echoed the Babylonian belief in cosmic patterns. NASA astronauts still nickname missions after constellations, and Wall Street quants analyze planetary cycles alongside market charts. The real story isn't astrology's fall from grace, but its stubborn refusal to disappear. It lingers like a ghost in the machine of modernity, whispering that maybe, just maybe, the ancients saw threads in the cosmos we're still learning to trace. Even in our age of algorithms and satellites, the whispers of ancient astrologers still echo, not in royal courts, but in smartphone notifications and coffee table conversations. Scroll through social media and you'll find millennials dissecting their Mercury retrograde woes with the same urgency Babylonian priests once tracked planetary omens. Newspaper horoscopes, those bite-sized descendants of Mesopotamian star charts, still command millions of daily readers, but this isn't just nostalgia, it's something deeper. When a viral tweet about Scorpio season sparks a million likes, or a pop star credits her success to her moon in Leo, they're tapping into a primal thread that connects us to those long-dead stargazers who first mapped meaning onto the cosmos. The real surprise isn't astrology's persistence, but its metamorphosis. Where ancient priests studied clay tablets, modern astrologers wield apps like CoStar, using AI to generate hyper-personalized readings. Yet the core remains unchanged, a hunger to see our lives reflected in something vast and timeless. Psychologists call it pattern seeking, the same instinct that led Babylonians to link Mars's redness to war now makes us joke about chaotic Gemini energy during turbulent times. The medium evolved, but the longing didn't. What ancient astrologers would marvel at, though, is how democratized their craft has become. No longer confined to elites, celestial insight is now a tap away for anyone with a Wi-Fi connection and a birth time. TikTok astrologers analyze celebrity charts with the precision of Assyrian court scribes, while Reddit threads dissect planetary transits like medieval monks debating scripture. This accessibility has reshaped spirituality itself, blending Babylonian zodiac lore with modern self-care. When someone checks their horoscope before a first date, they're not just killing time, they're participating in a ritual older than the pyramids, updated for the digital age. Yet the deepest allure might be astrology's uncanny adaptability. It survived Christianity's scorn, science's skepticism, and capitalism's co-opting because it offers something neither religion nor technology fully can: a sense of belonging to a story grander than ourselves. In a world of fractured identities and algorithmic loneliness, the stars still whisper that we're part of an ancient, unfolding drama, one where a bad day isn't random, but Saturn testing our resolve, or a stroke of luck isn't chance, but Jupiter smiling. That's the real magic the ancients gifted us, not the ability to predict the future, but the courage to believe it might still hold meaning. From Babylon to the digital age, the clandestine world of ancient astrologers and prophets remains a testament to humanity's restless pursuit of meaning in the cosmos. These shadowy figures, once the power brokers of empires, the whisperers in royal ears, did more than predict futures. They shaped them, weaving celestial patterns into the fabric of politics, medicine, and even warfare. Their legacy lingers not just in dusty scrolls or crumbling observatories, but in the way we still look to the stars for guidance, whether through algorithm-generated horoscopes or the quiet wonder of a clear night sky. What's remarkable isn't just their knowledge, but their adaptability. The same Babylonian priests who etched eclipse warnings into clay tablets would marvel at how their zodiac system now fuels TikTok trends. The oracle priests of Delphi, who spoke in riddles to kings, might chuckle at modern CEOs postponing product launches during Mercury retrograde. The tools have changed, but the hunger hasn't. To feel connected to something larger, to find order in chaos, to believe the universe might still be speaking to us if only we knew how to listen. Yet the real lesson of these ancient stargazers isn't about prediction, it's about perception. They understood that power lies not in controlling fate, but in convincing others you can. Their genius was blending mathematics with mysticism, turning cold celestial calculations into stories that moved armies and toppled kings. In that sense, their greatest trick was making the stars feel personal, transforming distant lights into mirrors reflecting human hopes and fears. As we peer deeper into space with telescopes and probes, we're still asking their questions. Are we alone? Does the cosmos care? The answers may lie not in algorithms or ancient texts, but in the space between where science meets wonder and where the next chapter of our celestial conversation awaits. The stars haven't stopped whispering, we've just forgotten how to hear them. So tell us, what do you see when you look up? Drop your thoughts below, and if you've enjoyed this journey through time, hit subscribe to keep exploring history's hidden corners with us. The past isn't finished speaking, and who knows, the next great cosmic secret might be waiting for you to uncover it.